Dear Professor Chomsky, it is our distinct pleasure to have the opportunity to welcome you on behalf of the Center for North American Studies of the University of Economics in Bratislava. It is our great privilege that you accepted our invitation to have a lecture via video conference to our students. As the manager of the Center for North American Studies, I would like to introduce you Ambassador Butora, who is our former ambassador to the United States and the guarantor of the course and of the center itself for North American Studies. With any further delay, I would like to give him the floor to introduce you. Thank you very much.
Good morning in Boston, Professor. Actually, you are a part of an event which was expected to take place a bit earlier. So now we are happy that you finally could do it with certain delay, but still to be here, to be visible, and certainly to be very loud voice. This course was created because we are convinced that North America region, in particular United States, Canada and Mexico, are playing important role and should play important role in international affairs. By the way, mentioning international affairs, this region of the world right now is focusing on international affairs. Yesterday we celebrated the fall of Berlin Wall. In the next days, together with our friends and partners from Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, and so on, we will celebrate the anniversary of the revolutions against communism. So we are very happy we have
difficulty understanding you.
Sorry? Yes.
All right. We're having difficulty understanding your words. Is there a microphone for the video conference as well?
I'm sorry?
Or is there just a
No,
microphone?
this is just the very brief introduction to welcome and to introduce the one of the fathers of modern linguistics, a political philosopher, a political activist, and well-known dissenting voice in U.S. establishment, Professor Noam Chomsky. Welcome once again, and we are eager to hear your remarks.
The last thing he said was, we are eager to hear your thoughts.
Would you mind staying here? Because I can't hear a word. That's to translate for me. Yeah. Okay, I'm very sorry, but I wasn't able to hear very well, but later he'll stay with me. I understand you'd like me to say a few words about the Obama presidency, how it fits into the record investigations. Is that correct?
Yes, of course. You are welcome to say anything what you want, and then we will continue with our questions.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Heard, yes. The most striking thing about U.S. foreign policy is how stable it is, how little it varies from administration to administration. And Obama is essentially a continuation of the second Bush term. The first Bush term was way off the spectrum. That's a narrow spectrum, had some variation, but Bush was off to the end. It was aggressive, violent, contemptuous, even of allies, told the UN, either you follow us or you're irrelevant, and so on. And U.S. prestige sank to its lowest level in history. The second Bush administration moved back towards the normal, less abrasive, rhetoric was more mild, continued the same policies, but the policy must never change. It's mostly the rhetorical framework. Obama, as predicted, is pretty much following the position of the second Bush term on domestic issues as well. Just to say a word about the continuity of policy, which really should be understood, let me just go back for a moment to World War II. During World War II, U.S. planners understood that however the war ended, the U.S. would be in a position of overwhelming power in the world, and that there would be a sea change in international relations. Now, the U.S. had been, at the turn of the century, by far the largest economy in the world, but outside of its own region and some forays into the Pacific, it was not really a global actor. The leading global actor was England. And it was clear that after the Second World War, the U.S. would displace Britain. And plans were laid under the Roosevelt administration from 1939 to 1945. There were high-level meetings of State Department planners with comparable people outside the government, high figures in the Council on Foreign Relations, the main ex officio foreign policy institution, and they laid detailed plans for the post-war world. I'll just quote you the main principles. The principle was that what they called a grand area, that would include at a minimum the former British Empire, the Western Hemisphere, the Far East, and of course the Western Asia, Middle East energy resources. And in this grand area, the United States would hold unquestioned power with military and economic supremacy, and would act to ensure the limitation of any exercise of sovereignty states that might interfere with its global designs. That's the grand area. Now, they assumed at first that Germany would emerge victorious on the European continent, but as the Russians began to grind down the Wehrmacht, they recognized that Germany probably would not emerge from the war, and the grand area was extended to include as much of Eurasia as possible, including at the very least Western Europe, the economic and commercial and industrial heartland of Eurasia. So that's the grand area, and those are the principles. And there's been no deviation from them since. So, for example, the people were offended by the Bush doctrine, but take a look at the Clinton doctrine right before him. Clinton's position was that the U.S. has the right to unilateral use of military power to ensure uninhibited access to key markets, energy supplies, and strategic resources, without even the pretexts that the Bush neocons insisted on. Now, the Clinton petition elicited no comment, no condemnation, unlike the arrogant, contemptuous proclamations of the Bush administration, because they were presented quietly, with polite restraint, and in fact just reiterated long-standing positions. And those are the positions of the Obama administration. Now, back in the Second World War, every region of the world was assigned its function, as it was called. Detailed plans were laid and later implemented to ensure that they fulfilled their functions. For the South, generally, the primary function was to provide resources, raw materials, investment opportunities for the United States and its industrial allies. For 1990, when Eastern Europe was brought into the system, if you read the business press in the West, the Financial Times in London, Business Week in the United States, they were euphoric because there's a new, cheap labor market coming, cheap, educated, healthy workers, even white, so that's even better. And the West used them to undermine living standards for Western workers, to undermine what was called the luxurious lifestyle of the Western workers, and could have a docile labor force and gain more profit. So Eastern Europe would let's function in that way.